a friend of mine who lives in Sarasota, and he did not evacuate. Again, that's just a little bit south of Tampa. And he said he did assess the damage when the eye went over, so the weather was a little bit more calm. And then of course he went back inside when the weather got bad. But he said there's a lot of carports that are down, like those covers. It's not really a garage, but it's like a cover for cars. A lot of carports have been damaged and demolished. A lot of roofs are off. He's seen a lot of pieces of, he doesn't even know what, plywood and other objects that are kind of blowing around and flying around. So because obviously it's still dark and millions of people are without power, especially along the Gulf Coast, they're going to have to wait until daylight to really be able to assess the damage.
And let's go straight to Orlando. Hurricane Milton has made landfall in Florida after nearly 6 million people in the Tampa area, we heard a lot about that yesterday, were put under mandatory evacuation orders. It's the first time in a century that Tampa's been hit directly. And as you will well remember, this is just 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene caused havoc in Florida and other states. Now, Hurricane Milton has been downgraded throughout the last 24 hours from a Category 5 to a Category 2 storm, but storm surges continue to threaten catastrophic flash flooding. Brooklyn Karasak is one of the millions to have been evacuated. She's left her home in St. Petersburg in western Florida and is now on the Atlantic coast.
The storm surge, we don't know how high it will be, but also there was another hurricane a week and a half ago. And so there's a bunch of things just laying out in the streets all throughout Tampa and St. Petersburg. And I think up and down the coast, which all of that stuff now is going to be projectiles in the hurricane winds. That being thrown through windows and houses and everything is a big concern as well.
Well, we can head now just north of Orlando to speak to meteorologist Amy Sweezey. Amy, thank you so much for staying up to talk to us. Tell us, what is the status of the hurricane right now?
Well, right now it is making its way across the state of Florida. So it did make landfall about 3.5 hours ago, 8:30 in Siesta Key, and that's just a little bit south of Tampa. So the main Bay Area in Tampa was actually spared from the strongest of the winds. But I mean, this was a difference of about 20, 30 miles. So it was not a lot that it jogged a little bit to the south. So now, as it makes its way across the peninsula of Florida and gets closer to Orlando, it is continuing to weaken a little bit. So that's why it's now downgraded. Just at 11 o'clock, about an hour ago, we were getting maximum winds about 100, 105 miles per hour. We're still seeing some gusts out ahead of it over along the East Coast, say Daytona Beach area, Cape Canaveral, where of course the rockets are launched here for us. We're seeing wind gusts already around 60 miles per hour, and that is going to increase as the storm continues to make its way east. So we're in the middle of it now. We still have several hours to go, not just from the wind, but also the rain. We are concerned about flooding. We've got a flash flood warning in effect for much of the metro area, the center part of the state, and that's because we've already had several inches of rain, and we've got another at least 3 to 6 expected on top of that by tomorrow morning.
We're hearing this phrase a lot, Amy, storm surges. What actually are they, and how much damage are they causing?
Yes. So the storm surge was the biggest concern for the Gulf Coast, for Tampa, for Siesta Key, for Sarasota, points along the southwestern coast by the Gulf of Mexico. That's where the storm was coming from. And as the hurricane moved in, of course, it grabs all of that water that's in the Gulf of Mexico and just pushes it up toward the coast. So Tampa Bay, because the storm, the center of the storm and the strongest wind was just a little bit south of the bay, it actually fared better than what was originally thought, because the storm was a Category 3 and not a Category 5 at landfall, and because it was a little bit farther south. So still concerned, though, about that storm surge in parts of, say, Sarasota and points a little bit south of Tampa. But it's still happening right now. So we'll kind of have to wait and assess the damage in the next several hours once the storm has passed by.
Yeah. And in terms of what's already happened, how much damage have you seen?
Yes. And this was mentioned a little bit earlier, I heard on your program, with Hurricane Helene coming through here a week ago. And there was a lot of damage that was already done along the Gulf Coast. And there were piles of debris lining the streets, and they didn't have time to get it cleaned up. So obviously that is the concern. I talked to a friend of mine who lives in Sarasota, and he did not evacuate. Again, that's just a little bit south of Tampa. And he said he did assess the damage when the eye went over, so the weather was a little bit more calm. And then, of course, he went back inside when the weather got bad. But he said there's a lot of carports that are down, like those covers. It's not really a garage, but it's like a cover for cars. A lot of carports have been damaged and demolished. A lot of roofs are off. He's seen a lot of pieces of, he doesn't even know what, plywood and other objects that are kind of blowing around and flying around. So because obviously it's still dark and millions of people are without power, especially along the Gulf Coast, they're going to have to wait until daylight to really be able to assess the damage.
What are people who stayed? What are they doing? Lots of reports of people in sort of hotels or in schools. I mean, what were the safest options left for people who said, look, for various reasons, I just can't go?
Right. And that was the big thing, especially along the Gulf Coast. If you were told to evacuate, mandatory evacuations, you were supposed to leave. A lot of those people did do that, and they left Tampa, they left Sarasota, they left Siesta Key, and they drove over to the Orlando area. So we do have a lot of people here in the center of the state. A lot of the hotels are filled. A lot of people hit the roads. The thing that was really, can you say that there's even good news in the storm? Yes, I think so. Because number one, the fact that the storm increased to a Category 5 so many days in advance, I think that scared people. And it really gave them a wake-up call and said, hey, I better get out of here on Sunday or Monday and not wait till the last second. In the past, we've had storms that were just tropical storms, and they just quickly intensified right before landfall, and it didn't give people a lot of time to evacuate. So with this one, they had time to see that it was a Category 5. And then, thankfully, we had strong wind shear. We had some dry air. We had an eye wall replacement cycle, several things that helped this storm weaken to a Category 3 at landfall. And then it quickly became a Category 2 once it did start interacting with land. Still a monster storm, still a major hurricane, still going to be a lot of damage, but a lot less damage with a Category 3 than if it had been a Category 5 at landfall.
Amy, thank you so much for staying up to give us the very latest. Amy Sweezey there, the meteorologist, speaking to us just north of Orlando as Hurricane Milton makes landfall in Florida about 3 hours ago.